Okay, thank you so much. Well, I would like to call this meeting to order and welcome everyone to the Assembly Committee on Legislative Operations and Elections. With that, Committee Secretary, will you please take roll?
Assemblywoman Dickman,
Here.
Assemblyman Frierson,
Here.
Assemblywoman Gonzalez,
Here.
Assemblywoman Howdegi,
Here.
Assemblyman Levitt,
Here.
Assemblyman Matthews,
Here.
Assemblyman MacArthur,
Here.
Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno,
Here.
Assemblywoman Thomas,
Here.
Assemblywoman Torres,
Here.
Chair Miller.
Here. With that, just a few housekeeping issues as we get started. Just want to remind people that we will have up to 30 minutes of public comment at the end of the agenda. We have 2 bills scheduled today, and for each bill, I will take up to 30 minutes of testimony in support or opposition. I would actually like to move the agenda around just a bit, taking Assembly Bill 126 first, and then doing our work session, and then moving into Assembly Bill 390. So with that, we have, I would like to open the hearing on Assembly Bill 126. This is sponsored by Assemblyman Jason Frierson and is a measure that provides for a presidential primary. So with that, Speaker, please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Jason Frierson. I represent Assembly District 8, and I'm also the Speaker of the Nevada State Assembly. I'm here today to present Assembly Bill 126, which would move Nevada to be the first state in the nation in the presidential nominating process and changes our current presidential nominating process caucus to a primary. So the question is, why should Nevada have the first say when it comes to nominating candidates for president? As Nevadans, we know how unique our state is. Our diverse population better represents that of the rest of the country, yet our state is small enough for more of our voices to be heard by those vying for the highest elected office in the land. Also, the issues that are shaping our country's future have been big issues right here in Nevada for years. Climate change, public lands, immigration, healthcare, tourism. Nevada helped put these issues on the map. I've worked my entire legislative career fighting to make voting and elections more accessible to eligible Nevadans. I believe this bill is another step in that direction. Nevada's made great strides to make caucuses more accessible, but the nature of a caucus limits the ability to make it as inclusive as a process of nominating our president can be. By moving from a caucus to a primary, more Nevadans will be able to have a say in who should ultimately lead our country. I'll now walk through the provisions of the bill and the amendment that I hope that you all received. The majority of this bill makes conforming changes to include the presidential primary and statutes that lay out policies and procedures for administering an election for election officials. Section 43 has a proposed amendment to make the presidential primary date the first Tuesday of February. This aligns with the historical practices of the Democratic and Republican national conventions that organize the presidential nominating process at the national level. We'll also continue to work with national committees on the primary calendar to ensure through 2023's legislative session that Nevada remains in compliance. The proposed amendment also removes references to other Western states scheduling a primary ahead of Nevada. And to be crystal clear, that the purpose of this bill is to set Nevada up to be the first presidential nominating state in the nation, not just in the West. Section 44 of the bill has a proposed amendment to move up the presidential candidate filing period to October 1st through the 15th. This change is needed for county clerks and registrars to carry out pre-election processes in time for the primary to be held on the first Tuesday in February. Section 6.5 adjusts the judicial and non-judicial candidate filing dates so that they don't overlap with the work county clerks and registrars need to do to administer the presidential primary election. Judicial and non-judicial candidates will file for office beginning the last Monday in February for the year in which the election is to be held and end 3 weeks later. Nevada has consistently punched above our weight when it comes to elevating the issues that we experience every day to national importance. And that's from addressing racial justice to climate change to, most importantly, staunchly working to expand voting rights. Our voices are diverse and better reflect the rest of the country than the current nominating structure. And it's time for Nevada to take its rightful place, not just first in the West, but first in the nation. This concludes my introductory remarks. I will say that, again, as with the other bills related to elections, we've worked with our local election officials and our statewide election officials, who I believe are the best in the country, to take into account, their experiences in implementation, and that is reflected not only in the bill, but certainly also in the amendment that was provided. So with that, I am happy to take any questions the committee may have.
Thank you. Committee members, do we have any questions? Well, not seeing any questions, I do see one. Assemblywoman Dickman.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Sorry to be so slow on the uptake. My question is there a plan for when New Hampshire moves their primary before ours? Because there's a couple of states that have made it clear that if we go first, they're moving.
Thank you again. For the record, Jason Frierson to Assemblywoman Dickman. Look, I'm not a legislator in New Hampshire or in Iowa or any of the other states that have historically gone early, but I know that Nevada better represents the population of the country than those states do. We meet for 120 days every other session, so we are certainly not able to have a moving scale the way some states do. And so our job is to make our case, not just to the RNC and the DNC, but also to those other states, that we are a better reflection. And I also think what's important is that we make our case to candidates. I think that it would behoove candidates to pitch their positions and make their case before a state's population that reflects largely what the country looks like. And so I think through that collaboration and communication, we would hope to make our case that Nevada is small enough and manageable enough, yet diverse enough to give candidates an opportunity to make their case to a diverse demographic, but also to a state that handles diverse issues, as I stated earlier. So, we will work with our election officials, both in the state and across the country, to make our case. And if I can't control what other states do, so if they do, this bill does not incorporate a moving target for a date.
Okay, thanks. So that's just what I wondered, if we wouldn't, once it's in the statute, that's the dates, right? Thanks.
Thank you, Assemblywoman. Have any additional questions from members? Okay, so not seeing any. Thank you, Speaker, for bringing this legislation forward. And let's open it up to those who would like to testify in support. So broadcasting, if you could open up the lines, we will take up to a half hour of testimony in support.
To testify in support of AB 126, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits, 150, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good evening, Chairwoman Miller and committee members. For the record, my name is Dakota Miller. That's DAKOTA MILLER. I'm a first responder and a constituent of 8018. I am calling in support of AB 126 because caucus systems are confusing, inaccessible to working folks who can't commit several hours, and would make Nevada first and best in the West. Thank you.
Caller with the
Hello.
last three digits, 725, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Hello, and thank you, Chair and committee members. This is Nick Shepak, Nickshepak, on behalf of the ACLU of Nevada. We want to thank Speaker Frierson for bringing this overdue and very important bill. The current caucus system is a messy, confusing system that appears to have been designed to deter participation. Every elector should have a say in nominating their party's candidate, and the caucus system does not give them that. I have seen firsthand the chaos that is the caucus system in this state, working as a precinct, can run out of registration forms, delaying the caucus for hours. My father, who delivered mail for the United States Postal Service, has had to take hours off of work in the middle of delivering a route to attend a caucus in which only 4 other people showed up in his precinct. He then had to finish his route, returning home well after dark, exhausted and frustrated. This is not how voting should be. The system is silly at best. It is not conducive to working class people, people with disabilities, or older adults. And in a traditional primary, these individuals can vote quickly and conveniently. The state has worked hard and continues to work hard to increase access to the polls by expanding early voting and polling locations. And even with these changes, voting can remain challenging for some. While I personally may miss arguing with a small group of strangers who live in my general area over who is the best candidate for the party, we have social media that can scratch that itch. Untold thousands of Nevadans will benefit from a traditional primary system, and we should do everything we can to encourage participation in the process. Please support this important piece of legislation.
Caller with the last three digits, 898, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
For the record, my name is Annette Magnus, and I'm the Executive Director of Battleborn Progress. We are here in support of AB 126. It is time to make this process more accessible for our growing electorate and all sides of the aisle. Moving to a presidential preference primary system proposed by this bill to give oversight of the presidential primary process to the Secretary of State and County Clerks. This provides assurance to voters that their votes will be tabulated in an unbiased public third party, increasing confidence in the primary system. Furthermore, the simplicity and efficiency of a presidential primary preference primary avoids the confusion sometimes created by the caucus process, which can be esoteric for some voters, not overly knowledgeable about the rules counting procedures. More confidence and easier process means greater participation, which is good for our democracy. AB 126 also sets rules for polling locations during the presidential preference primary to include at least 10 days of early voting and long hours of operations to ensure as many eligible voters have a chance to participate as possible. All of this makes for more secure and accessible primary elections for Nevada voters. We thank Speaker Frierson, Majority Leader Benitez Thompson, and Chairwoman Miller for their work on this measure. Please support AB 126. Thank you for your time.
Caller with the last three digits, 035, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good afternoon, Chair Miller and honorable members of the committee. For the record, I'm Quentin Savoy, Quentin, S like Sam, A like Apple, V like Victor, WOIR with Make It Work Nevada. So much of our work is anchored around public education and keeping our communities fully abreast of all the happenings that will directly impact our communities and our day-to-day lives. During the 2020 election, we threw this public education into overdrive to ensure that our community members were able to use their voice at every single turn. Admittedly, explaining the caucus process to individuals and families who aren't routinely engaged in the electoral process was especially challenging. It was hard getting people to understand the rules associated with going to a particular precinct when just 2 years prior, we were explaining to community members that they could go to any vote center. As well, it was complicated explaining to community members this concept of viability and why it was important for them to have a second and in some cases a third or fourth choice pick. Participating in democracy shouldn't be a formulaic science. It should be accessible and standardized so that all Nevadans know what to expect when it's time to use our voices in choosing our elected leaders. AB 126 will eliminate a great deal of the arbitrary rules and deadlines associated with the caucus process. It will also put to bed this antiquated process of caucusing that doesn't seem to serve the era and time that we're living in. Passing this legislation will propel Nevada forward in welcoming more people into the process of selecting future presidential candidates. And it will also aptly position us to become the first state in the country to select presidential candidates. We urge bipartisan support for AB 126. Thank you.
Caller with the last three digits, 018, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good afternoon, committee. My name is Jim Sullivan, JIMSULLIVAN, and I'm representing the Culinary Union. The Culinary Union supports AB 126, which will establish a primary election in lieu of a state caucus. In the 2020 Democratic presidential election, the majority of the caucus participants chose the early vote rather than to participate on caucus day. The Culinary Union hosted an early vote site for the first time in 85 years for union and community members to participate in this democratic process. Culinary Union mobilized members and their families to vote early. We are proud that over 2,500 Nevadans casted their ballots in 4 days at the Culinary Union early vote site location. In addition, several Las Vegas Strip casinos hosted 24-hour voting sites, which gave workers the option to vote at their job. AB 126 promotes voting accessibility, encourages voters to participate in the presidential primary election, and simplifies the voting process for all voters. Lastly, Nevada is more representative and reflective of the diversity of our country. As the largest organization of Black, AAPI, Latinx, and immigrant workers, the Culinary Union believes that Nevada's diverse communities should be the first in selecting a presidential candidate. The Culinary Union urges the Nevada Legislature to support and pass AB 126. Thank you.
Caller with the last three digits, 201, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good afternoon, Chairwoman Miller, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Emily Persad Zamora. That's EMILY PERSAUD-ZAMORA. I'm the Executive Director of Silver State Voices, calling on behalf of the Latin Nevadans Vote Coalition. Today, we stand in strong support of AB 126 because it would make participation in our presidential preference elections much more accessible to everyday Nevadans. The reality is that while primary elections tend to have lower turnout than general elections, caucuses tend to have the lowest turnout because it leaves a large number of people out of the process. Everyday working Nevadans, which are the communities that we and our partners work with on a daily basis, may not be able to commit to several hours to attend their precinct's caucus. It is simply inaccessible to many Nevadans. Another issue is the educational component that goes into helping community members familiarize themselves with the caucus system. It is long and complicated, and it can be intimidating and discourages many from participating. AB 126 would provide more oversight and transparency, as the elections departments would be responsible for conducting the primaries. The clerks have ample experience conducting elections, and it would keep elections out of the hands of political parties. Thank you to Speaker Frierson for bringing this bill forward and for always advocating that Nevada's voting systems are equitable and accessible to everyone. Thank you.
Caller with the last three digits, 487, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good afternoon. My name is Dawn Echeverry, DAWNETCHEVERRY. I am the Vice President of the Nevada State Education Association, speaking in support of AB 126. When Nevada hosted the first caucus back in 2008, NSCA and the National Education Association invested money and time in Nevada, teaching state residents how to participate in the process. Many hours were spent by trainers traveling the state, helping voters and high school seniors learn the Republican and Democratic caucus system. As one of the members of the team, I will say we worked tirelessly to make the voters comfortable. Unfortunately, the process is confusing and for many uncomfortable. NSBA supports the return to the primary process. Casting your vote is a privilege, and the process should not be hard to understand and must be accessible to all.
Caller with the last 3 digits, 242. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Yes, good afternoon, Chairwoman Miller and the members of the committee. For the record, my name is Reverend Leonard B. Jackson, and that's Leonard, Leonard, Jackson, Jackson. I am the director of Faith Organizing Alliance, a faith-based organization that strives to increase civic participation in the Las Vegas Valley and a partner of Let Nevada's Vote Coalition. FOA is in full support of AB 126 because it would preserve Nevada's first in the West status and even move us closer to first in the nation. Nevada is known for being one of the most diverse states in the nation, and that's apparent in our school system, our communities, and at the ballot box. While our state parties have long performed diligent work running the presidential caucus for years, 2020 made it clear that attitudes about the caucus process are changing. AB 126 ensures that the Nevada presidential preference primary is held on the second to the last Tuesday in January of each presidential election year. If another state in the West chooses a date before this, the SOS must choose an earlier date after January 2nd. This means Nevada stays first and best in the West, with Nevada uniquely situated in the presidential primary process as a diverse state full of working people. Our values and our people are deserving to cast their vote among the first states in the cycle. AB 126 protects that and even puts in contention to be the first state and the best in the West. Thank you.
Caller with the last 3 digits, 543. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
I pushed the wrong button.
Oh, we can hear you.
No, I did it too soon.
Okay.
Yeah.
Caller with the last 3 digits, 740. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
For the record, my name is Alex Goff, ALEX-GOFF. Thank you to Chair Miller and members of the committee for taking time to hear this bill today. Thank you to Speaker Frierson and his staff for working on AB 26 and bringing it for you before you today. I serve on the Democratic National Committee for our state of Nevada, and giving Nevada's voters a voice to shape the national debate is something I believe that is central to my role, and I look forward to casting the vote to make Nevada's first in the nation at the Democratic National Committee. I urge your support for this bill, and I look forward to working with all of you to see this become reality. Thank you and have a wonderful day.
Caller with the last 3 digits, 715. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Hello, my name is Taylor Patterson, TaylorPatterson. I'm a member of the Bishop Paiute Tribe and the Executive Director of Native Voters Alliance Nevada. We are in full support of AB 126 as it will be a more inclusive process for all Nevadans, but particularly for Native Americans. In 2020, we saw the many difficulties associated with the caucus system. Our community, which already experiences low voter turnout, was bogged down by the confusing rules and process. This bill will create an equitable system that all communities can easily participate in. It will also allow tribal governments to request their own polling locations, allowing for further convenience and accessibility for all natives. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Caller with the last three digits, 710. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good evening, Chair and committee members. For the record, my name is Maria Nieto Horta. That's Maria, last name Nieto, second last name Orta, and I am the Nevada State Coordinator for Mi Familia Vota, a nonpartisan organization that strives to improve political efficacy in the Latino community and a partner of the Let Nevadans Vote Coalition. MFV is in full support of AB 126 because primaries would make it easier for new citizens to participate in our electoral process. AB 126 is important because the caucus system may be confusing and difficult to maneuver through, especially for first-time voters who have not experienced caucuses before. For an organization that works closely with your Latino constituencies, AB 126 would be beneficial for the eligible permanent residents who become new citizens, as the electoral process, especially during a presidential election, can be one of the most confusing. Also, it is important to note that the caucus system is not necessarily accessible for working class communities who do not necessarily have the time to participate, as they work sometimes 2 to 3 jobs to make ends meet, have to watch over their kids to ensure that they're going to school and being fed. When they have other priorities that have to do with staying alive and keeping a roof over their heads, participating in a democracy process will not be a top priority. AB 126 will allow people to participate in an equitable way and make sure that they are still meeting all their needs. I urge you to please support AB 126. Thank you for your time.
Caller with the last three digits, 326. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin. Caller 326, please press star 6 to unmute.
Hi, for the record, my name is Verania Rebolledo, Veraniarebólledo, and I'm an organizer at Make the Road Nevada. We are an organization committed to building power amongst our members through organizing policy, innovation, and transformative education. We are also partners of Let Nevadans Vote Coalition. Make the Road Nevada is in support of AB 126 because transitioning back to direct primary system would make our presidential selection process much more accessible for Latinx and working class communities across Nevada. Throughout the year, we constantly engage with our members to ensure that they have the proper resources and are well prepared to advocate for themselves and to participate civically. Although we make it a priority to help educate them, there are several different civic processes. We found that the entire caucus system is quite a challenge. During the past election cycle, MRNV saw the firsthand how confusing the caucus system may be for the first-time voters. We held bilingual trainings, phone banks, and even canvassed our community, and even caucused early in groups in efforts to increase new voters turnout. Even so, it is extremely intimidating for majority of our members, especially those whose first language isn't English. Beyond the confusing system, it requires people to be able to spend an intermediate amount of hours that often requires them to take time from their work, and several employees, which that means like losing wages from their work, and families desperately need to stay in budget. So for all these reasons, a direct primary system would make participation in the presidential selection process fair, more accessible for new voters, especially Latinx and working class Nevadans. So that's why we extremely urge you to support AB 126. Thank you.
To testify in support of AB 126, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last three digits, 486, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Yes, hi.
Good evening. My name is Artie Blanco. That's ARTIEBLANCO. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I am here to testify in support of AB 126 as an at-large member of the Democratic National Committee. Nevada's status as a caucus state made sense when we became one of the first 4 nominating states. We've done a tremendous job to overcome the limitations caucuses historically present, and the state party did incredible work in making the 2020 caucus a huge success. We introduced early voting for the first time ever and made it far more accessible in providing caucus materials and trainings in multiple languages. But as we move forward, it's time to shift to a primary process, and Nevada should become the first early state to vote in the 2024 primary for many reasons. A primary will ensure as many Nevadans as possible have the opportunity to participate, which is incredibly important. As a member of the Rules and Bylaws Committee of the Democratic National Committee, I look forward to communicating and showing my colleagues why Nevada deserves to be first in the nation. I commit to working with them and our legislators to do all we must in the 2023 legislative session should we need to become in compliance. Again, I thank the Speaker, Frierson, for bringing this bill forward, and that it's time now for Nevada as the most diverse state to become first in the nation. Thank you.
Caller with the last 3 digits, 054. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin. Caller 054, please press *6 to unmute.
Hi,
Chairman,
my name is Aldo Pardo. That's ALDO PARDO. I am a constituent of Assembly District 15, and I am calling today in support of AB 126. I would like to ask Chairwoman Miller and the committee members to please pass this bill. Thank you.
Caller with the last 3 digits, 543. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin. Caller 543. Please press *6 to unmute. Caller with the last 3 digits, 415. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good evening, Chairwoman Miller and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Aria Flores, ARIA FLORES, and I am the Las Vegas Area Director at Chista, Nevada. I am in strong support of AB 126 because, frankly, caucuses are difficult to maneuver through, especially for new voters who have not experienced this before. I saw this firsthand in 2016 when my father participated for the first time. I remember seeing how confused he was, but luckily I was able to explain the process to him. I've also seen the same confusion in other Latino families where they are often bring their children to explain the caucus system to them. When I first participated in the caucus, I noticed that many folks often walked out before casting their vote because not everyone can commit to several hours to attend their precinct's caucus. This often leaves first-time Latino voters with a feeling of frustration in our electoral process. The transition to primary preference election would make it easier for folks who have a language barrier to engage in our electoral process, and they are far more accessible for working Latino voters who need the flexibility to choose the best day and time to cast their ballot. Also, primary elections ensure the transparency while also giving the voters' right to see the ballot. I urge you to support AB 126. Thank you for your time.
Caller with the last three digits, 135. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good afternoon, Chair Miller and committee members. My name is Carrie Durmick. That is Kerrydurmick. I'm the Nevada Director with All Voting is Local, a voting rights project housed at the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights, and we are also a proud member of the Let Nevadans Vote Coalition. All Voting is Local is in full support of AB 126. During a presidential preference primary, those who vote within the contest of the party they are registered to vote will fill out a card with their choice indicating their preference and simply casting their vote. The hassle, time, and sometimes obscure rules around the caucus process can be left in the past in favor of this simpler and more accessible system for voters that are new and old. Oversight of the process by the Secretary of State and county clerks provides assurance to voters that their votes will be tabulated by an unbiased public third party, increasing confidence in the system. Additionally, AB 126 would require polling locations that must be active 10 days before the election through the Friday before the day of the presidential primary election. Voters will be able to vote early in person on Sundays or federal holidays, and hours of operation for locations must be 8 hours Monday through Friday and at least 4 hours on Saturday. Nevadans need to ensure that we are protecting everyone's right and freedom to vote. This bill would give Nevadans a better option to make their voices heard and cast their ballots in a safe way. All Voting is Local asks the committee to support AB 126, and thank you for your time.
Caller with the last three digits, 767. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin. Caller 767, is it possible that your phone is muted? You are unmuted on our end.
Sorry about that. Hello, Chairwoman Miller and committee members. My name is Oved Gutierrez. That's Ovedgutierrez. I'm a voter of Assembly District 31. Assemblywoman Dickman is actually my assemblywoman, and I voted in the last election. I'm calling today in support of AB 126. Please pass this bill. Thank you.
Caller with the last three digits, 689. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good afternoon, Chairwoman and members of the committee. My name is Anwar Green. That is Anwar. Last name Green, Green. I am a constituent of Assembly District 16, and I'm here in support of AB 126 because it's time to make this process more accessible for our growing electorate on all sides of the aisle. Moving to a presidential preference primary system provides assurance to voters that their votes are being counted by an unbiased and public third party, which increases confidence in the primary system. Additionally, the simplicity and the efficiency of a presidential preference primary helps to eliminate the confusion that's sometimes created by the caucus process, and that helps to instill voter confidence, which means greater participation, which is good for our democracy at the end of the day. So AB 26 makes for more secure and accessible primary elections for Nevada voters. And for that, I'd like to thank Speaker Frierson, Majority Leader Benitez Thompson, and Chairwoman Miller for their work on this measure. I urge you guys to please support AB 126, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. And broadcasting with that has we have done 30 minutes now of support testimony. So I will be closing support testimony. Broadcasting, can we move to anyone who wishes to testify in opposition?
To testify in opposition to Bill AB 126, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last three digits, 543. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Lucy Gonzalez. Luckygonzales. I oppose AB 126. It is too costly for our state. There is no need for a third election. The primary elections already meet the needs of this bill. I realize as a nonpartisan Nevadan, our comments do not matter because the committees are already just voting along party lines. But don't be fooled by this wolf in sheep's clothing. The authors are merely trying to manipulate you and our elections by providing yet another opportunity for bad actors on both sides to compromise the integrity of our elections. They want to encourage voters to switch parties with same-day registration so they can infiltrate their opponents' closed elections in order to pick the worst candidates and eliminate viable competition to their own party's candidates. Caucuses were re-engaged to weed out bad actors wishing to corrupt our primaries. Presidential primaries are just another ploy to undermine the accurate reflection of the true will of the party, no matter which side of the aisle. This is just another power grab for Clark County to further disenfranchise the 16 other counties in Nevada. The third revision was supposed to be there, but there are no amendments posted to Nellis. So who knows what's really in this bill? Scripture tells us to refrain your freedom to cover up for evil. 1 Peter 2:16. Educate instead of our current processes. Please reject this bill for the evil it is attempting to afflict.
Caller with the last three digits, 304. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Hi, my name is Jim DeGraffenreid, DeGraffenreid. I represent Nevada on the Republican National Committee, and I am in opposition to this bill. With just 3 exceptions, Nevada has used the caucus system for the last 75 years, although for most of this time, we were irrelevant to the presidential selection process because it happened after the nominee was already determined. However, in 2008, we joined Iowa, New Hampshire, and South Carolina as early states, and suddenly the caucus was very popular. With greatly increased attendance, we had a learning curve on how to run an inclusive caucus, but Republicans have improved our process every year. By 2016, participation in our caucus was 17.8% of registered Republicans, which was almost the same as the 18.5% participation rate in the primary election that year. We include absentee voting for military members as well as vote and go options to maximize participation and eliminate confusion. The fiscal notes estimate the cost of a primary election at well over $5 million. Given the post-pandemic budget situation in Nevada, we don't believe this is a good use of state resources, particularly when our party has demonstrated the ability to hold a successful caucus with participation rivaling that of a primary election. In the past, there has been legislation to allow parties to determine how they prefer to select their nominee. Under such a law, in 1996, Republicans held a primary election, while Democrats stayed with the normal caucus process. Leaving us the choice of how to nominate our own candidates is far more fair than having the state dictate that we abandon a fair and inclusive process. The biggest problem with this bill is that it violates party rules on when caucuses and primaries can be held. Both parties have rules that prohibit caucuses or primaries in any state before the first Tuesday in March, with the exception of the 4 carve-out states. Under Republican Party Rule 16C1, we can't hold our caucus more than 1 month prior to the first Tuesday in March. Democrat rules are much more restrictive. Rule number 12 states that Nevada may not hold its caucus earlier than 10 days prior to the first Tuesday in March. Democrat Delegate Selection Rule 22 is 3 paragraphs long, is very specific that Democrat state parties are to take every possible step to...
Sir, that is your time. You're free to submit the remainder of your remarks for the record, please.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair, the line is open and working. However, we have no more callers in opposition to AB 126.
Okay, thank you. Can we open the lines for anyone wishing to testify in neutral?
Yes. If you wish to testify in neutral on AB 126, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. To testify neutrally on AB 126, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, the line is open and working. However, we have no callers wishing to testify neutrally on AB 126.
Okay, thank you. And with that, Speaker Frierson, would you like to make any final remarks?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, members of the committee, for your time and attention. Jason Frierson for the record. I appreciate the discussion and the input. I do believe that changing from a caucus to a primary would absolutely serve a purpose of allowing more people to participate and be heard without the process of having a caucus that is largely a pep rally. And I think normal voters have been discouraged from participating in that process increasingly. And so I would be more than happy to answer any questions after the hearing, but I urge the committee support.
Thank you so much, Speaker Frierson, for that. And with that, I will go ahead and close the hearing on Assembly Bill 126. With that, I would like to go ahead and open up our work session because I know we have members that are leaving for 6 o'clock hearings. So I want to make sure that that we have quorum for our work session. So Mr. Sturm, can you begin and take us through our work session documents?
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, this is Pepper Sturm, Committee Policy Analyst, and as an employee of Llcb, I cannot advocate or oppose legislation. I'm just here to review measures that are up for the work session. And Madam Chair, if time is a concern, you can certainly cut me off and make sure I hit highlights versus going through the details of these bill pages. The first bill in the work session is Assembly Bill 129, sponsored by Assemblyman Roberts. We heard the bill on February 23rd. I've kind of shortened a summary of this bill because I'm going to go through the proposed amendment and refer to what's in the bill a little later. The measure revises current law to require a political action committee, also known as a PAC, to open and maintain a separate account in a financial institution. It must also make certain reports concerning contributions and expenditures. And further, the measure requires the PAC to report its account balance at the end of a specified reporting period. Finally, AB 129 makes conforming changes to reflect those requirements and specifies that these new requirements only apply to reports on contributions and expenditures filed by the PAC after January 15, 2022. As far as amendments go, Assemblyman Roberts recommends mock-up Amendment 3129 for your consideration. It should be attached to work session document behind this page. With the number of cross-references to different sections of the NRS and with some of the dollar amounts changing and others remaining the same, it may be less confusing to summarize the proposed amendment by separating the requirements into the three categories you see on the bill page here and describing the proposed changes in context when the bill is introduced. Those three categories are contributions, expenditures, and the bank account. Under contributions, existing law requires PACs to report each contribution exceeding 1,000 and contributions from one contributor that cumulatively exceed 1,000. The original version of this bill required a PAC to report each contribution exceeding $100. Also, contributions received from one contributor that cumulatively exceeded 100. And third, the total of all contributions received, which are $100 or less. The mock-up that you see before you increases those thresholds for those first two $1,000 on the contributions exceeding 1,000. Also increasing to 1,000 those contributions from one contributor. And the third is the total of all contributions received, which are $1,000 or less. The existing law for expenditures requires PACs to report each expenditure exceeding $1,000 and expenditures made to one recipient that cumulatively exceed $1,000. The original version of the bill required the PAC to report expenditures exceeding $100 each expenditure. Second, expenditures made to one recipient that cumulatively exceed $100, and the total of all expenditures made which are $100 or less. The mock-up retains those amendments made by the original version of this bill. With regard to the bank account, existing law requires PACs to open up a bank account when they receive contributions in aggregate of $1,000 or more. The original version of the bill decreased the threshold for a PAC to open the bank account from $1,000 to $100, and then also required the PAC to report the balance of the bank account at the end of the same reporting periods as contributions. The mock-up retains those amendments made by the original version of the bill. And as I said, a detailed mock-up of the amendment is included immediately following this bill page. And with that, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much. So, members of the committee, are there any questions? If there are no questions, I will entertain a motion for Assembly Bill 129. It would be an amend and do pass.
So moved.
Thank you. I have moved by Vice Chair Howdigy. Do I have a second?
Second, Assemblyman Levitt.
Thank you. Second by Assemblyman. Are there any additional questions or comments on the motion? Okay, and with that, Committee Secretary, can we take a, are we required to take a roll call vote? Okay, let's go ahead and take a roll call vote.
Assemblywoman Dickman?
Yes.
Assemblyman Frierson?
Yes.
Assemblywoman Gonzalez?
Yes.
Assemblywoman Howdigy?
Yes.
Assemblyman Levitt?
Yes.
Assemblyman Matthews?
Yes.
Assemblyman MacArthur?
Yes.
Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno?
Yes.
Assemblywoman Thomas?
Yes.
Assemblywoman Torres?
Yes.
Chair Miller?
Yes. And with that, the motion carries. And I would like to assign the floor statement to Assemblyman Levitt.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. With that, I will close the work session on AB 129 and open it for AB 321.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Assembly Bill 321 was sponsored by Assembly Members Frierson and Benitez Thompson. We heard the bill on April 1st, 2021. Assembly Bill 321 makes extensive changes to Nevada's election statutes. The bill replaces existing law concerning ballots for absent voters, mailing precincts, and mail ballots with new provisions that require county and city clerks to send each registered voter a mail ballot for all elections. The existing processes for preparing and distributing the ballots are essentially maintained with a few changes. In a similar manner, the processes are maintained with certain changes for voting as well as for the return, verification, and counting of the mail ballots. Assembly Bill 321 also provides an opt-out provision for active voters who prefer not to use the mail ballot at their request. Deadlines for a city or county clerk to receive a ballot are shortened from the existing 7 days following the election to 4 days. The bill, if you want me to skip through the highlights here, I'll do so, Madam Chair.
That would be fine.
The bill requires the appointment of a bipartisan counting board. It also specifically authorizes the use of manual or electronic electronic signature verification and sets up a procedure for using them. The deadline by which a voter can either provide or confirm a missing or questionable signature is reduced from the current 9 days to 6 days. Standards are established for testing the accuracy of the signature verification devices. And county and city clerks and their election staff are required to complete approved class on forensic signature verification. In the bill as written, the person's birthday information was excluded when they were asked to confirm their identity, although I believe the mock-up removes that requirement. The Secretary of State and the State Registrar of Vital Statistics are required to do a comparison at least monthly of the statewide voter registration list with records concerning the death of residents. In addition, confidentiality protections concerning personal information are extended to certain election officials at their request. And the current automatic voter registration statutes are clarified by specifying that the voter who is registered to vote by the Department of Motor Vehicles and who has produced the required documents at that time will not be required to show proof of identity or residency when voting for the first time in a federal election. The measure also extends the deadlines for requesting polling places at Indian reservations and Indian colonies. As far as amendments go, Speaker of the Assembly Jason Frierson recommends mock-up 3219 to this measure, which does the following, and I'm going to also hit the highlights of that. I'll skip a few things, but the committee is certainly able to read the rest of this. First, it requires a minimum number of polling locations by size of county for early voting and election day activities. It authorizes online voter registration within the Secretary of State system with no break between the end of early voting and election day. It specifies that if new voters are newly registered or have updated their information after the 60-day opt-out period, they will receive a mail ballot unless they opt out at least 14 days prior to the election. If they register to vote or change information within 13 days of the election, they must vote in person. The amendment also clarifies that Indian reservations and Indian colonies may request a polling place, a ballot drop box, or both a polling place and a ballot drop box. It also sets up a deadline of 60 days prior to the election for a voter to opt out of receiving a mail ballot. It also changes the time by which a person may provide acceptable proof of identity from 3 to 6 days following the election in order to align with other deadlines. The amendment also removes the requirement for a written statement from a person assisting a voter filling out the form, but requires such a person to provide his or her name, address, and signature on the return envelope. The amendment also requires that a ballot drop box be provided at all early voting and election day polling sites and prohibits anyone other than the city or county clerk from establishing a ballot drop box. The amendment also allows for differences in punctuation, the use of one name of a voter with 2 last names, as long as the signature does not otherwise differ from that which is on file. The amendment aligns signature verification requirements specified in NRS 293-385 to apply to mail-in ballots. As well, it requires answering questions from the election board officer regarding personal data that is recorded on the voter registration application form, providing personal data that verifies the identity of the voter, or provides proof of identification as described in NRS 393-277, other than the voter registration card issued to the voter. The amendment also clarifies that a voter may be contacted for a signature cure via electronic means, which includes electronic mail, provides that when 2 mail ballots are returned in the same envelope, they must be rejected, requires the election board officers to indicate received on the roster when signatures are verified, and then change the status to voted after all ballot processing procedures are completed and the vote is counted. The amendment also revises the date for polling location requests from Indian reservations and colonies, making them 1 month earlier than specified in the bill as written, March 1st for primary elections and August 1st for general elections. It also clarifies a voter's date of birth can indeed be a piece of information used to verify the person's identity if the voter appears at the polls in person and his or her signature does not match the signature on file. And again, the detailed mock-up follows this bill that has all this information in detail. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. And with that, committee members, are there any questions? All right, I will entertain a motion on Assembly Bill 321.
Would like to make that motion to amend and do pass Assembly Bill 321, Madam Chair.
I'll second,
Madam Chair.
Thank you. So we have a motion to amend and do pass by Vice Chair Howdige and a second from Assemblywoman Gonzalez. Any further questions or comments? Assemblyman Levitt?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And although I appreciate the bill sponsor addressing some of the concerns of constituents, I cannot support this bill at this time, and so I'll be voting no on this measure. Thank you.
Thank you, Assemblyman. Any additional questions or comments? Assemblyman Frierson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to be clear because I can't help but think that the amendment addressing some of constituent concerns is kind of an understatement. There was a letter that was circulated, and I believe that this amendment addressed 95% of the items that were mentioned in that letter. And that was not from constituents, that was from colleagues in this body. So, you know, it's difficult to make concessions and find common ground if it's not an option. And so, you know, moving forward, I'll continue to, but if someone's a no, then be a no, and don't list out things that are the problems if those problems get addressed and there's still a no. I think that as AB 321 goes a long way in addressing both constituent concerns, concerns that we received via email and concerns expressed by members of this body. And so we will continue to work and see if there are other areas where folks would be moved if those adjustments were made. I do think that it's incumbent on us on measures that we may not agree with, if we can mitigate them, that it is common and until recent cycles been customary to make concessions and make good bills better and make bills that you don't agree with less bad. And that's kind of how government works and this policy development process works. And I hope one day we get back to that.
Thank you, Speaker. And with that, Committee Secretary, please take the roll call vote.
Assemblywoman Dickman?
No.
Assemblyman Frierson?
Yes.
Assemblywoman Gonzalez?
Yes.
Assemblywoman Howdige?
Yes.
Assemblyman Levitt?
No.
Assemblyman Matthews?
No.
Assemblyman MacArthur?
No.
Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno?
Yes.
Assemblywoman Thomas?
Yes.
Assemblywoman Torres?
Yes.
Chair Miller?
Yes. And with that, the motion passes, and I would like to assign that floor speech to Vice Chair Howdige.
Thank you, Chair.
Mr. Stern?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The next bill on work session is Assembly Bill 392. That bill was sponsored by the Assembly Committee on Judiciary and was heard by the committee on March 30th of this year. Assembly Bill 392 requires the Legislative Counsel Bureau to enter into an agreement with a qualified consultant to analyze information submitted by law enforcement agencies concerning traffic stops and submit a report concerning the data. The measure sets forth the contents of the report, including certain questions that must be addressed, how information gathered from traffic stops is used and preserved, the identification of any software used by the agencies, and whether that software is compatible with systems used by the Central Repository for Nevada Records of Criminal Records. The consultant must make recommendations about what data should be collected, Also, how data collection might be improved. Third, the preferred data software features. And last, the use, control, and analysis of that data. The information the consultant is required to analyze was submitted to the Llcb pursuant to the provisions of Section 9 of AB 3 of the 32nd Special Session. This provision required that law enforcement agencies provide a report to the legislature on or before November 1st. That included certain information about traffic stops and other stops by law enforcement officers and the software used to process the identity or driver's license number of the person during such a traffic stop. At the hearing, there were no amendments to this bill. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And with that, do we have any comments or questions?
I have a question, Madam Chair.
Yes, Assemblyman MacArthur?
More of a question, I think, of curiosity. Why is the Llcb getting involved with traffic stops?
Assemblyman, it's not so much that Llcb is getting involved, but it's a request for to study and we've also already had the hearing bill, so that would have been the time to ask those particular policy questions.
Okay.
Any additional questions? Okay, with that, I will entertain a motion for Assembly Bill 392.
So moved, Madam Chair. Vice Chair Howdy.
Thank you. We have a motion by Vice Chair Howdy. Do I have a second?
Second, Assemblywoman Torres.
Thank you. We have a second by Assemblywoman Torres. Any additional questions or comments? Okay, with that, can we have the roll call vote, please?
Assemblywoman Dickman?
Yes.
Assemblyman Frierson?
Yes.
Assemblywoman Gonzalez?
Yes.
Assemblywoman Howdigi?
Yes.
Assemblyman Levitt?
Yes.
Assemblyman Matthews?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Assemblyman MacArthur?
Yes.
Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno?
Yes.
Assemblywoman Thomas?
Yes.
Assemblywoman Torres?
Yes.
Chair Miller?
Yes. And with that, the motion carries, and I would like to assign this floor statement to Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno. With that, I'll close the work session on 392 and let's open it for 421. Mr. Sturm, I believe you're still on mute.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, Pepper Sturm. Assembly Bill 421 was sponsored by this committee and heard on March 30th. Assembly Bill 421 establishes the preferred manner of referring to persons with mental illness and persons who are deaf or hard of hearing. The measure makes specific references to what is considered the preferred respectful language in NRS for those individuals and lists the words and terms that are not preferred when referring to those individuals. In addition, the bill specifies that the Nevada Administrative Code must also use respectful language and sentence structure when referring to persons with mental illness or persons who are deaf or hard of hearing. The Legislative Council must update the wording changes in reprints and supplements of the NRS and supplements to the NAC to conform with the provisions of this bill. And with this bill, there were no amendments proposed during the hearing. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Sturm. Is there any committee members, any questions or comments? Okay, I will entertain a motion for Assembly Bill 421.
Matthews, so moved.
Okay, Vice Chair Howdigi. And do I have a second? Was that
Second.
Assemblyman Matthews?
Yes.
Okay, and a second. You're welcome, Assemblyman. Second by Assemblyman Matthews. Any further questions? Okay, let's take a roll call vote.
Assemblywoman Dickman,
Yes.
Assemblyman Frierson,
Yes.
Assemblywoman Gonzalez,
Yes.
Assemblywoman Howdigy,
Yes.
Assemblyman Levitt,
Yes.
Assemblyman Matthews,
Yes.
Assemblyman MacArthur,
Yes.
Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno,
Yes.
Assemblywoman Thomas,
Yes.
Assemblywoman Torres,
Yes.
Chair Miller.
Yes. And with that, the motion carries. I would like to give this floor statement to Assemblywoman Brown May, because I see that you are in here. There you are. So Assemblywoman, so you agree to the floor statement. Okay, thank you so much. Next, let's move to Assembly Bill 422.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Assembly Bill 422 was also sponsored by this committee and heard on April 6th. Assembly Bill 422 requires the Secretary of State to create a centralized top-down database that collects and stores voter pre-registration and registration information in all counties. County clerks must use the database to collect and maintain records of voter pre-registration and registration. The Secretary of State is required to use the database to create the official statewide voter registration list. As far as amendments go, Speaker Jason Frierson proposed an amendment that does the following. First, it revises the effective date to be January 1st, 2024 for all other purposes. And it also provides the Secretary of State submit progress reports to the Interim Finance Committee every 6 months, beginning January 1st, 2022, concerning the implementation of the provisions of the bill. And again, the mock-up detailing these changes follows this page. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Members, any questions or comments? All right, not seeing any. I will entertain a motion. And I have a motion from Vice Chair Howdigy. Thank you, to amend and do pass. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Assemblywoman Gonzalez. Any additional questions or comments? Okay, with that, let's take a roll call vote.
Assemblywoman Dickman,
Yes.
Assemblyman Frierson,
Yes.
Assemblywoman Gonzalez,
Yes.
Assemblywoman Howdigy,
Yes.
Assemblyman Levitt,
Yes.
Assemblyman Matthews,
Yes.
Assemblyman MacArthur,
Yes.
Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno,
Yes.
Assemblywoman Thomas,
Yes.
Assemblywoman Torres,
Yes.
Chair Miller.
Yes. And again, the motion carries. I would like to assign that floor statement to Assemblywoman Torres. Mr. Sturm, are we prepared for the work session documents for Assembly Bill 126? You're still on mute.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think you can hear me now. I have not entered anything into Nellis at this time, but we can go through the summary of the bill and the proposed amendment if you prefer.
If we do that, would it be, are we still able to take the vote right now? Or shall we wait until after the second bill?
I think you can take the vote whenever the chair wants to.
Okay. All right, let's go ahead and work session Assembly Bill 126.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Pepper Sturm again. Assembly Bill 126 was sponsored by Assembly members Frierson and Benitez Thompson and Miller. It was heard, of course, today. Assembly Bill 126 establishes the requirements and procedures for conducting a presidential preference primary election to be held by each major political party on the Tuesday immediately preceding the last Tuesday in January for each presidential election year. And of course, the mock-up made a change to that, which I'll mention later. An exception is made for a party in cases where only one major party candidate has filed a declaration of candidacy. The measure establishes the procedure for a candidate to make a declaration of candidacy for the primary. Additionally, the date may be adjusted if another Western state schedules its presidential primary or caucus prior to the date set in the bill. I believe there's a change there as well. The state pays the cost of this election from the Reserve for Statutory Contingency account. The bill clarifies that minor political parties do not participate in the presidential preference primary. Major political parties, precinct meetings, and party conventions must occur after the presidential preference primary. A registered voter who indicated a major party affiliation may vote at any polling place in the county, and each county must provide a vote center for the day of the presidential preference primary. The bill provides a time frame for early voting, and same-day voter registration is approved. An Indian tribe is authorized to request a polling place for the purposes of this primary within an Indian colony or Indian reservation. The Secretary of State is required to compile the returns and certify the number of votes. County clerks must compile and submit information to the Secretary of State consistent with the information they provide for primary and general elections. Further, county clerks must also publish information about the presidential preference primary and are required to post a notice if a qualified candidate listed on the ballot has died. As is the case for current elections, these officials must also determine the number of registered voters by precinct and district in their county and the political affiliation prior to the presidential primary election. And again, we had mock-up number 3222 presented by Speaker Frierson, and I believe that changed the date to be the first Tuesday in February for each presidential election year. There were a number of other changes, I believe, that the speaker went over. I believe there was a change about the Western states. I believe that was deleted. Speaker Frierson can probably correct me if I'm wrong. And I think there were a number of conforming changes throughout that reflect the February, the last Monday in February date, and some conforming changes for when the clerks need their information. And I believe that may cover what was in the mock-up. Again, Speaker Frierson may have some additional information on that, but I believe that was most of what was in the mock-up. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Stern. Members, do we have any questions or comments? Okay, no questions or comments. A motion to amend and do pass AB 126.
So moved, Madam Chair. Amend and do pass.
Thank you. I have a motion by Vice Chair Howdiggy. Do I have
I'll
a second?
that.
Okay, I have a second by Assemblywoman Gonzalez. Any additional questions or comments on the motion? Hickman?
Just a quick comment. I have serious concerns about the cost of having two primaries, especially when there's so many things we are not funding this session. And also it does violate the rules of both parties. It could end up causing us to lose our first in the West. So because of those things, I have to be a no, at least for right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Assemblywoman. Any additional questions or comments?
I may, Madam Chair?
Yes, please, Speaker.
Again, I don't want to rehear a bill, but I also don't want a record to be inaccurate. I think the bill presentation and the mock-up were clear with the reality that we have and will continue to work with the RNC and the DNC not violate rules. So I think that was a mischaracterization of what the bill does. You know, minds can disagree, and that's fair. I just want to make sure that we're making a record that's accurate. I have not received any indication that this is jeopardizing our position in the West, let alone in the country. But again, if there are folks that have concerns about money, those are fair concerns. I think that democracy costs money, and it's well worth it. And so that is certainly an issue that will have to be vetted, you know, because this will have mandates that will cost local governments funding, and that's been part of the commitment with the local election officials to address.
And Madam Chair, if I may, Mr. Speaker,
Assemblywoman, members need to be recognized, but the comments are supposed to be directed on about the policy. This isn't the time to go back and forth between members and open a debate. So if you'd like to make a comment, again, in general about your position on the motion or the policy, that would be fine.
Thank you, Chair. And what I was just going to say is that's why I'm saying for now. If we find out this is not going to violate, but we don't know at this point. So I'm a no for now. Thank you so much. Okay, thank you, Assemblywoman. And of course, you know, everyone reserves the right to change their vote on the floor. And again, you know, we'll just see when we get there. Right now, let's go ahead and Committee Secretary can please take a roll call vote.
Assemblywoman Dickman?
No.
Assemblyman Frierson?
Yes.
Assemblywoman Gonzalez?
Yes.
Assemblywoman Howdegi?
Yes.
Assemblyman Levitt?
No.
Assemblyman Matthews?
No.
Assemblyman MacArthur?
No.
Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno?
Yes.
Assemblywoman Thomas?
Yes.
Assemblywoman Torres?
Yes.
Chair Miller?
Yes. And with that, the motion carries, and I will go ahead and take the floor speech myself. So with that, I will close the work session items and move on to our next item on the agenda, which is Assembly Bill 390. So Assembly Bill 390 is sponsored by the Committee on Legislative Operations and Elections and presented by Speaker Frierson. This measure requires a notice of contest of an election be provided to the candidate whose election is being contested. And with that, Speaker Frierson, we are ready for you. Please proceed.
Thank you again, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Again, for the record, my name is Jason Frierson, Assemblyman for District 8, here to present Assembly Bill 390. My notes say this bill is rather, and I'm not going to say that word straightforward, but that typically jinxes folks. But this bill simply requires the defendants in election contests are notified that such a contest has been filed. I can say that I believe that the practice has always been to notify, but it's not been legally required. Currently, if someone were to contest your election, the contester under the law has no obligation to notify you that such a contest has been filed with the appropriate authority. In civil cases, for example, a defendant is given every reasonable opportunity to be notified that such a case has been brought against them. This is not uncommon practice in election contests either. Per data from the National Conference of State Legislators, at least 14 other states expressly require that defendants in an election contest are notified. I want to be clear that AB 390 does nothing to change current processes or procedures that exist for challenging an election other than simply notifying the person who's being challenged. Assembly Bill 390 simply ensures that election contests are treated similar to other civil cases and gives those who have elections that are contested a reasonable time to prepare their affairs and defense. Walking through the provisions of the bill, Section 1 addresses the process for a candidate at any election or any registered voter to contest the election of any candidate except for the office of U.S. Senator, Representative in Congress, Office of the Governor, Lieutenant Governor, Assembly Member, State Senator, Justice of the Supreme Court, or Judge of the Court of Appeals. Under existing law, to contest an election, a written statement of the contest must be filed with the district court. AB 390 adds language to Section 1, subsection 5, to add that the contestant must notify the defendant that the statement of a contest has been filed. Section 2 addresses the process for a candidate or registered voter to contest an election for the office of State Assembly and State Senate. A statement of contest must be filed with the Secretary of State under existing law. Again, the AB 390 adds language that says that the person who is contesting it has to notify the defendant that a statement of the contest has been filed. Section 3 addresses the process for a candidate or a registered voter to contest the election for the office of Governor, Lieutenant Governor, Supreme Court Justice, District Court Judge, or Judge of Court of Appeals. And similarly, under existing law, a statement of the contest must be filed with the Secretary of State. And again, AB 390 adds language to Section 3, subsection 1 to add that the contestant and the Secretary of State shall notify the defendant that a statement of contest has been filed. In conclusion, AB 390 is an effort to give everyone whose election is contested the benefit of being notified at the very least. It may sound obvious, but technically there's no requirement that someone be served. And because of that, they could miss a deadline and be penalized for it. Usually what happens is you find out in the press, you find out in the newspaper, you find out in a tweet, you find out casually, but technically it's not required that you be notified. This simply says you're going to contest an election, notify the parties that you're contesting the election. And with that, that concludes my remarks, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Speaker, for bringing this forward. Questions. It looks like Assemblyman Levitt has a question.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker, for presenting this very straightforward bill. I'll say it for you. My question is this just addressing like a current practice, just codifying a current practice into law? Is that what we're doing here?
For the record, Jason Frierson, to Assemblyman Levitt. It is not. It's actually adding a requirement that is ordinarily done. Ordinarily, if I say to you, Assemblyman Levitt, I think that I'm going to contest your election. I file it with the Secretary of State's office. Ordinarily, again, I would either tell you, or the Secretary of State's office would tell you, or you'd find out in the press. In narrow circumstances, none of that happens, and you're left not knowing. And this simply says you're going to contest someone's election. You should tell them so that everything is able to happen. It has happened where elections have been contested, and someone thought that the Secretary of State's office was going to notify the person. The Secretary of State's office thought that the person contesting the election was going to notify the person, and ultimately the person was never notified. And so this simply just says, give the person, the notice that their election's been contested, and then the process moves forward as it ordinarily would.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Assemblyman. Members, any additional questions? Okay, not seeing any questions, we'll go ahead and open up for testimony in support. Broadcasting, can you open the lines, please?
Callers wishing, pardon me, pardon me, Chair. In order to...
It's been a long day.
Yeah, pardon me. All right. In order to testify in support of AB 390, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Anyone wishing to testify in support of AB 390, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers on the line in support of AB 390?
Thank you. Do we have anyone queued up for testimonies of opposition?
Anyone wishing to testify in opposition to AB 390, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, the line is open and working. However, we have no callers in opposition to Bill AB 390.
Thank you. Can we open up the lines to see if there's anyone who'd like to testify in neutral?
Anyone wishing to testify neutrally on AB 390, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, the line is open and working. However, we have no callers wishing to testify neutrally on AB 390.
Well, thank you for that. Speaker Frierson did say that this was a straightforward bill. So, Speaker, do you have any final words for us that you would like to leave us with? Any final remarks?
Thank you very much, and I will stop there.
Okay, thank you. With that, I will close the hearing on Assembly Bill 390 and open up work session on Assembly Bill 390.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Pepper Stern, Assembly Bill 390 was, of course, heard just now. It was sponsored by the Assembly Committee on Ledge Ops. The bill requires that any notice of a contest to an election must be provided to the candidate whose election is being contested. The person contesting the election must notify the candidate. If the contest is for a candidate in the general election for the offices of governor, lieutenant governor, member of the Assembly, or the state Senate, Supreme Court justice, or appeals court judge, both the person contesting the election and the Secretary of State must notify the candidate whose election is being contested. And there were no amendments proposed for this bill. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Stern. With that, do we have any questions or comments about the bill?
I'd like to make a motion to do pass.
Okay, we have a motion from Vice Chair
Dickman?
to do pass. Assemblywoman?
Second Dickman?
Okay, and a second from Assemblywoman Dickman. Any further discussion or questions? All right, please take the roll call vote.
Assemblywoman Dickman,
Yes.
Assemblyman Frierson,
Yes.
Assemblywoman Gonzalez,
Yes.
Assemblywoman Howdagi,
Yes.
Assemblyman Levitt,
Yes.
Assemblyman Matthews,
Yes.
Assemblyman MacArthur,
Yes.
Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno,
Yes.
Assemblywoman Thomas,
Yes.
Assemblywoman Torres,
Yes.
Chair Miller.
Yes. And with that, the motion passes, and I would like to assign that floor statement to Assemblywoman Gonzalez.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. With that, that is the end of our business, and we have successfully moved all of our bills out of committee. So we can move on to our final agenda item for the day, which is public comment.
Anyone wishing to make public comment, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits, 543, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Lucy Gonzalez, Lucygonzales. No part of our state law should compromise the safety of its laws or legal citizens. There has been much testimony in several committees on the consequences of undocumented persons simply being held accountable to current laws. Yet no one seems to be able to provide a valid explanation of why migrants conscientiously choose to violate rules of the privileges of living in the United States. Why aren't resources being spent and efforts being made instead to get these persons documented rather than protecting them from laws? Why aren't these persons going to as great of lengths to get documented as they are trying to circumvent our laws? The implementation of laws is not what is separating families. It is their deliberate and conscious choice not to follow laws that separates them. There is no evidence that they are being suppressed from getting documented, especially for 20 to 30 years. Funding our local law enforcement agencies have been depleted to be able to enable agencies not to work together and support each other. Scripture tells us the moral thing to do is to follow the laws of authority. Encouraging migrants to remain undocumented is immoral. Comments about due process is hypocrisy when undocumented migrants aren't following due processes of migration. Why aren't migrants getting documented to remove fears of being deported, threats from drug cartels, etc.? There have been no arguments to explain this. Community and trust is built through following rules and laws, not breaking or circumventing them. Nevada should provide no law to support breaking other laws.
Chair, the public comment line is open and working. However, we have no more callers at this time.
Okay, thank you for that. With that, because I know that there was a few minutes for people to jump on if they were wishing to make public comment, I will go ahead and close public comment. So at this time, committee members, we do have an agenda for tomorrow. It will be call of the chair. So just make sure you're paying attention, and we will notify everyone in advance if and when we come back into committee. But with that, no other business before us, I will go ahead and adjourn this meeting. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Chair.